3, 2, 1. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to bring you the Flowing Health podcast. And I've got Neena Saith here today, who's an energy healer. So welcome to the show, Neena.
Thank you.
And I know we're going to be talking about health, healing, overwhelm today. So keep listening in. I think many of us have had overwhelm. Maybe we've got it in our lives right now. And it's a word we're hearing a lot more about these days and how to cope with it. So Neena, maybe we could just start with your story and talk a little bit about how you came to work as an energy healer. And as important is maybe an experience that you've had in your life that determined or brought you to where you are today. Something interesting, I'm sure it will be anyway.
Yeah, so thanks, Alessandro. So I had quite a dramatic career change back in 2015. And I used to be in catastrophe risk management. So I was working for a catastrophe modeling company. And actually my focus was very much on the energy of the earth and weather systems, earthquakes, floods, all natural hazards, and understanding how they impact property and life. So it was thoroughly interesting. My background's in meteorology. Again, totally energy driven from an environmental point of view. I worked in catastrophe risk modeling for just under 10 years. And it was really actually after the birth of my first son, when I went back to work full time 9 months later. And that's probably the first time I remember feeling overwhelmed. And it was kind of that having to juggle all those plates. I had quite a long commute as well. And I was also doing quite a lot of international travel. But I was very ambitious in my career growth and quite focused on that. So I sort of continued over the next couple of years. I got to the point where I did cut my hours down. I sort of recognized the need for that and discussed that with my boss at the time, who was great in allowing that. But actually, several years on, I realized that my spark had gone, my passion for that job had gone. And looking back on it now, I can see actually that had probably gone because I was overwhelmed with life in general. And what actually stopped me, I had gone through a long phase of neck and shoulder pain. And actually that had kind of put me on the path to trying to understand why that pain was there, because I'd tried everything physical and none of the physical solutions were helping me. And so I came to the realization that this isn't physical, this is something else going on, and I needed to understand and get to the bottom of it and help myself heal from that. And actually that took me on a path where I discovered what energy was in the sense of our energy bodies and how that impacts our health. And whilst at the time when I first heard about it, it landed pretty well with me. I understood it, but equally, I found it quite hard to totally get my head around because of my scientific mind kicking in, but I can't see this. Is it really there? And, asking all those very natural...
You want proof, yeah.
You want
evidence.
proof, yeah. But actually my proof was there because when I put myself on a course to learn more, and, someone had told me you'll learn to self-heal. And that obviously sparked something within me and I just booked on. And when I did that course, that was my evidence, because when I finished that course, just a weekend, my neck and shoulder pain went and I felt amazing and my energy levels increased. I had a lot more clarity of mind. And I knew something had shifted. I still kept on asking myself those skeptical questions, going, is this real? But equally, that was my evidence. Something had changed, and it had impacted me physical, but it wasn't a physical thing. So I just kept learning and asking more and more questions. And eventually it took me to the point where I stepped away from my corporate job, and never with the intention of practicing energy healing on anyone else. I just knew that that wasn't the right career for me anymore, and I needed a break. I had got to, I guess, my tipping point. And actually, Alessandro, you know, I think I'd got to my tipping point, and then I went through a couple of miscarriages, which totally tipped me over the edge and forced me into that decision of saying, no, I've got to step back and spend time with my son. And, you know, that, as stressful as it was at the time, it was totally the right thing for me to do. And once I stepped back, the clouds slowly started clearing, and I could suddenly see life more clearly. You know, that was quite a big lesson for me in actually taking a step back sometimes, even though it was quite a scary thing to do at the time. It served me well. So that's sort of, in brief, how I came about energy healing.
That's a powerful story. I mean, I know that even as long as 20, 30 years ago, I met people. In those days, they didn't use the word sort of overwhelmed so much, but they'd burnt out, or they'd actually, they couldn't get out of bed in the morning. Basically, their body had said, I am not going back to work. You know, I'm not doing what you want me to do because you haven't listened to me, you know, the body. And so actually it is amazing, and it's sad, you know, that you went through some of those more obviously, you know, quite traumatic things like the miscarriages, and it's almost like big lessons until we really take heed. So I think it's amazing that you're helping people these days, because that word now, overwhelm, is used a lot. And maybe can we talk a little bit about, you know, apart from work, you know, what does overwhelm look like with people, you know, coming to you? Obviously, their work-life balance is one thing.
Yeah. So, you know, with the word overwhelm, it can be quite broad, but essentially the way I see it in terms of what it results in is people end up with a sort of lack of focus and concentration, and inability to function as they normally would, often confusion, and often it results, if it goes on for a long time, it can result in completely freezing, almost, you know, where you're so sort of full, if you like, you know, overwhelmed being just too much of something. And you've got so full that you literally can't do anything, even though you've probably got this long to-do list and lots of things on your plate. You get to this point where you just can't function as you would like to. But I think there's a lot of different things that can cause overwhelm. You know, there's sort of various emotions. You can be overwhelmed with a certain emotion. So, you know, for example, I remember when I miscarried, I was totally overwhelmed with sadness, like I had never felt before. I don't think I had ever felt that sad, and it really, you know, it overwhelmed me completely. You could be overwhelmed with grief. You could be overwhelmed with love. I remember when I had my first son, I did feel quite overwhelmed at the intensity of the love that I felt for this little baby, that I never understood how much I would love him, and it was quite an overwhelming feeling. I remember that very well. And then there's certain situations that can be very overwhelming. So, for example, if you're someone that picks up on other people's sort of emotions, or, you know, you pick up on other people's energies, you might find it quite overwhelming being in crowded places for too long, or, you know, or going into cities, for example. You know, that can be quite an overwhelming feeling. Situations with work can be overwhelming when you simply just have so much to do, and that overwhelms you. But just coming back to the very basics, I see that overwhelm is to do with your thoughts and emotions and the perceived of the perception of a situation. And, you know, from an energy point of view, you know, we all have this energy body, and that houses our thoughts and emotions. And so when we have a lot of thoughts and emotions about a certain situation, or we're perhaps absorbing a lot, then your energy body is essentially getting fuller and fuller, to the point that it impacts all your senses and how you process information.
And I imagine also can affect, you know, physically, we can have physical sort of reactions, but also emotional, and some disconnect also between the mind and the body. You know, I think that's often the case, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, when the energy body becomes congested, as it does with overwhelm, you know, if you tune into your body, you might start to feel it in certain areas of your body, or you might get aches and pains in certain areas of your body. Yeah, you know, like you say, you might feel quite disconnected as well. So actually coming into your body can help you reconnect, and bringing the awareness to your body.
Yeah. So with your work, is it about reconnecting people to their energy, their whole energy system? Just talk us through a little bit how you might help somebody, you know, with your work, with your energy work.
Yeah, well, a lot of people that do come to me have got to the point where they are just totally overwhelmed, and actually often they're lacking motivation and focus, often with brain fog, and often just kind of to the point where that their productivity is at rock bottom. So, you know, I talked about how overwhelmed with all these thoughts and emotions, and essentially sort of clogging up the energy system. So what I help to do when I work with people is to bring balance and essentially cleanse the energy system, so that the energy can flow. And that's what we want. We want our energy to flow and be free flowing, allowing fresh energy into the system and expelling old stagnant energy. So I work with the energy body to do that. And so often as a result, people's motivation increases after a session. That's quite a common sort of side effect, if you like, of a treatment. And people will often say, oh, my brain fog's gone, or you know, I'm really got a lot done, my productivity's increased. And it essentially brings a sense of reconnection. It's helping people reconnect within, because you're clearing away the rubbish that's accumulating in the energy system.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's like when we sleep, the body is flushing toxins, isn't it, out of the brain, and actually repairing. So all these processes need, I mean, thank God we do have sleep, because otherwise I think we'd be in real trouble. So, you know, it's done for us during sleep, but in the daytime, if we don't actively do something, then, like you say, I think things can get on top of us, and maybe not even be so aware of it until it's, you know, I don't want to say too late, but until it has a, you know, negative effect on ourselves and those around us as well.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, you know, you talk about sleep, but unfortunately sometimes it's sleep that is one of the first things to suffer when we become overwhelmed, isn't it? Because our minds are just racing.
Yeah.
You know, let's just say in a situation and you've got a lot on at work, you've got a lot of deadlines to meet. you've got quite an intense situation. And I remember this from my career, that at certain times during the year when we were responding to a natural catastrophe, and I would barely sleep because my mind was whirring away, with all the information and with everything that I needed to do the next day. And that gets you in a vicious cycle, actually, particularly if it goes on for a long time. I think for a short period, that's okay, and people can get by on that. But when that extends and the sleep's disrupted for a very long time, then that recovery on your own is a lot harder.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I was just thinking, you worked in catastrophe risk management, but you're kind of doing the same for people.
I know, I do, and I do sort of see that it's like helping people with their personal catastrophes now, rather than
because we're part of the world and nature, and even look how the world is suffering as a result of our actions. So actually, human, if we can get the humans in good shape, then the world will be in better shape, because there's still, as we know, many people, including some world leaders, who don't believe that climate change and that we have a crisis with the climate and in the environment, which is hard to believe, really, but that's reflection of the humans maybe being out of sync themselves.
Well, I think that's right, isn't it? Because as we heal and our hearts open, we become less self-centered and are able to sort of help others as well. So it definitely goes hand in hand, doesn't it?
Definitely. And just out of interest, do you find more women come to you, men, mix?
It's a real mix, actually. And when I first started out, it was just women. But actually now it's probably about 50-50. Mm-hmm. But that, I see that as the way that I view who I can help, rather than, men being more or less open. I think I've opened up to the fact that I'm comfortable and enjoy working with men. Whereas when I first started out, I think my comfort level was with women. Yeah. And that was just a belief that I had, rightly or wrongly. But now, I don't feel limited to just women, and I am getting men come to me.
Good, that's great, because in my experience, and also being a man, we're just generally, and I'm generalizing, but we're just not as good at opening up and being vulnerable or showing our vulnerability. So I think it's great that men have access to people like yourself, and things like Qigong, which I work with as well, because all these modalities really are really needed, and especially if they're in roles of leadership or corporate, if they're working and caring about the relationships around them, and more aware, self-aware, then everybody benefits.
Yeah, exactly. And especially as there are still more men in leadership than women, so again, rightly or wrongly, but it's it's important that men just as much as women seek help and build awareness of themselves.
Yeah, and I think this energy healing, I mean, a few years ago it would have been seen as something very odd, whereas now everybody understands that we are energy beings, and what we attract to us is also a reflection of our state. So if we're, for example, very angry and can't cope, then we tend to attract difficult situations. And if we have a bigger vision of the world and can tune in more to ourselves and our mind and body and that connection, then we deal with situations much more easily and clearly, like you said.
Yeah, so definitely.
And anything we could share with our listeners that maybe they could easily they could do during the day if they, or maybe firstly signs of overwhelm, where you would recommend people start, seeking some kind of help with it, because we don't want it to get too late where people have some kind of physical or mental more serious issue. So any signs to keep an eye on firstly?
Yeah, well, I think recognizing the signs comes hand in hand with the first thing I would say as helping yourself, because the first step is becoming aware of how you're feeling and building an awareness. And there's lots of things you can do to start building an awareness. But, one of those is just start asking yourself questions. So if you're sat at your desk and you've got a to-do list, as most people have in some form or another, and you just find you're not getting things done, just sit with that and just recognize what you're feeling about your day or the next couple of hours and what you need to get done. Recognize those feelings, sit with them, and just ask why. If you're feeling worried, ask why. If you're feeling fearful about a certain task, just sit with that and allow it. So that's signs of overwhelm is the fact that you might not be getting anything done. You might be reacting to things in ways that you perhaps wouldn't normally react to things. So, for example, if you've got children and they're pushing your buttons as they tend to do, and you're responding to that sort of more sharply than you might otherwise do. Perhaps you're finding you're not processing information. Perhaps you're going to meetings during the day and you're just not taking things in, or you're not able to input as you might normally. Perhaps you just simply can't concentrate. And I think that's a big one with overwhelm, that that focus that you normally would have has gone. So if you start to see those signs creeping in, one of the first things I'd suggest is just to take a step back. So step away from things. So if you're in the office and you're kind of noticing this, try and block out a bit of time in your diary, go for a walk. Getting outside in nature is it's so healing. And even if you're in the centre of London, just take yourself
go to a park,
go to the park, get near the water. Block a chunk of time out in your diary and just allow yourself to be. And if you can, follow a meditation. There's so many free meditations on YouTube, and you can look for meditations for overwhelm. I came across some lovely ones today, just out of interest, what was there. But really, it's just about connecting within. Doing some breathing exercises is very helpful. So, if you can't block time out of your diary and you're sort of stuck at your desk, just plant your feet firmly on the ground, close your eyes, don't worry about what's going on around you, and just really connect to your breath. So really notice the rise and fall of your tummy and your chest. Feel the air coming in and out your nostrils, and just focus on your breathing, and try and do that for a good few minutes, as long as you can. And even that simple process will help to clear some of your energy and help to ground you as well. So that sort of leads on to my next suggestion is always building in a practice of grounding yourself. So often when we're overwhelmed, we're very much in our heads. So if we can connect down to the earth and essentially sending our energy down, it will help us feel more stable connected and grounded. It, you know, it does what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
And you can do this by planting your feet firmly on the ground, whether you're inside or outside. It doesn't matter. You can do it anywhere. And just imagine lots of golden light flowing through your body, coming out the soles of your feet and penetrating deep, deep down into the earth. And, you know, if you like, you can imagine these as tree roots really planting you to the Mother Earth and connecting you. And that in itself can really be a very calming practice. So just taking a minute or two each day to do that, if you're in a period where you're feeling very busy and you've got a lot on, can really help to keep you calm and more focused.
Wonderful. I mean, that's quite a common one in Qigong as well. The earth is what we call the yin element, as you probably know, but the receptive and the nourishing. So if we drop down from the body and release, then we're supported. But, you know, as humans, we tend to think we've got to do all this work. Actually, we've got to do the opposite and stop doing, like you said, and just allow this connection. And it's always there for us, but we just need to take that time. So I think that's a great tip to remind ourselves. And I like the idea of the light coming through the body and clearing a lot of the stuck energy or you know, emotions, moving it through the body, which is what we do also in Qigong. It's like the flow, what you mentioned earlier, getting the flow through the body and allowing the energy to work for us. And
I think you strike a good point there about, you know, we're not used to kind of stopping, are we? And when I look back at my career, and particularly after the birth of my son, it was just go, 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 go all the time. And occasionally at lunchtimes, I'd take myself off and do an exercise class or something. And towards the end of my career, I got, you know, there were a couple of people in the office that I would do walking meetings with, which was brilliant. But generally I'd be in meetings back to back all day, and that was just so much information just coming at me all the time. And I would go home and just be completely exhausted, but not necessarily sleep. And, you know, when I look back at that, I was just not building in that time to just be and notice how I was feeling and what that was doing to me. And so I think I was just filling up and filling up. It's easy to do, like you say. It's easy to do, yeah. It becomes habitual, especially I think in the corporate world. And even if people are working from home now, I've heard of some people working from home, but they're working harder from home because their teams aren't there, and they've got to manage these teams around whatever, the UK or the world. And it's actually more stressful because you can't see the people right in front of you. So, I mean, even with what I know now and with what I do, I still have to keep a really close eye on how I'm managing my day-to-day life and make sure that I'm practicing what I preach. Because when I don't, I really do notice the effects, and maybe part of that is that I am more self-aware now. And I think as your awareness grows, you sometimes feel that things are hitting you more. But I think that is just because you're more aware. So exactly. I think the practice, practicing what we preach. And I noticed that myself, I am quite busy online helping people, groups and individuals with Qigong, but every so often I do forget myself. And then I realize, that I'm just busy, but I'm not really nourishing myself. And I just have to stop. And somebody I spoke to recently, she made this lovely comment about making time for the unknown, and to put a time in our calendar every week for time with the unknown, and no plans. That's a great idea. Yeah. No plans for that time. It doesn't have to be long, but we can all spare an hour a week or 2 hours. Yeah. And just put it in there, and no calls. We can go for a walk or something, but just leave it as open.
and sometimes we get ideas of what we would like to do, at that time. And it's just, so I'm making more and more time for the unknown. But for me personally, I just wake up earlier now, because I find it sort of more stimulating to start the day well. I was just talking to somebody today who has real trouble when she starts her day. She feels very heavy and stressed, so she doesn't get out of bed because she doesn't really want to start her day. So I think how we start the day, obviously how we sleep, deeply is important, but how we start the day is just as important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, I've always found that if I'm doing, meditating or self-care practices, I do find that at the start of the day is the best time for me to do them. And there's something quite special about being up before the rest of the household, if you can do that.
If you can,
particularly with young children around, it's it's often the only sort of peace and quiet time.
It's the only time. Yeah,
it's the only time. Yeah,
I was working with a GP, and he wanted 6 a.m. classes for Qigong because he had a 7-year-old son. And the only time he could do it was before his son woke up. So I had to wake up at 6. But it was good for me as well. It was like a really early morning. And by 7, my day had started well, and his day had started well.
Because you're doing such a great practice as well, aren't you? With the Qigong,
exactly.
You're getting inside the body and
I mean, I get so much. I'm sure you do. Working with people, there's a real kind of reward, back to us as well. Sometimes I think in the old days with this kind of energy work, a lot of it was giving and healing. And now I feel the energy is available to all of us. So I'm just facilitating it, but I'm getting just as much. They are. And that's what's changed, I think, as well, that this is something much more accessible and simpler. So I really appreciate those great steps you gave, being aware, becoming aware, asking why, recognizing what's going on, what you're feeling, not being too reactive, breathing, grounding. And what we'll do is we'll put in links to your website and any links. I know you're quite active on Instagram, so we'll put your social media links so people can get in touch.
Lovely,
if they need help with overwhelm and other health issues. So I imagine, is it online mainly at the moment?
I've got people coming in person as well. So I'm based in the New Forest.
All right. So
and I see people both in Lymington and Burley. But again, I probably do about half online and in person. And it's no less effective when it's online. I think some people find it quite hard to get their head around, well, how is this going to work online? But it works. It's great, and it does.
It's amazing. I'm surprised. I think my Qigong teacher's surprised. I know other coaches who've had thousands of people online, and they said it's more effective than in person often, because in person, what happens, sometimes people get worried about, the travel, getting there, where are they, the environment, are other people watching, whereas online, you're often in the safety of your own kind of environment, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah, exactly.
So lovely to chat, and please get in touch with Neena, if you want some help. And I do also offer a kind of a free chat if people are thinking of working with you.
I do, We'll, we can chat for however long is needed and understand, what issues, how they want help.
Fantastic. We'll put the link in the calendar. We'll put the link below to how people can book in on your website. So I really appreciate you chatting to us today, Neena. Good luck.
Thank you. Thanks
with
for
everything.
having me.
And remember, always keep a smile in your heart. I always remind our listeners, and thanks for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.